Good evening, and thank you for joining us for Alaska weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. If you've tried our forecast line today at 1-800-472-0391, you may have noticed that it's delaying in its updates some today, but we'll have that fixed very soon. We've been working on the network a bit today, and it is what's causing that issue. But again, we'll have it back up and running and updated as quickly as we possibly can. If you ever have any feedback or comments for us, you're welcome to email us anytime at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. And if you have internet access and need a forecast on the fly, feel free to visit weather.gov/Alaska, where you can type in your zip code and get a 7-day forecast for your exact location. Looking at what's been happening around the state, yesterday, Juneau International Airport tied its record for most number of days in June with measurable rainfall. That measurable rainfall being 0.01 inches of rain or more. So 25 days in June, Juneau saw at least 0.01 inches of rain. That's tying the record from 1949, so a pretty old record to begin with. Juneau has seen almost 7.5 inches of rain in the month of June up to today. And the normal amount for Juneau in June is just over 3 inches. So between 4 and 4.5 inches above normal for rainfall in Juneau during a time when this is usually the dry season for Juneau. So pretty impressive rainfall month this month for Juneau. We're not expecting much in the way of rain in Juneau today. It's pretty low probability of rain for today, the last day of June, June 30th. But if Juneau does see even a trace of rain today at the airport, that'll be every single day in June with at least some rainfall, at least a trace of rainfall falling. So pretty impressive record for Juneau. Taking a look at what we do have as far as hazardous weather, nothing for Juneau, but we do still have our flood warning in effect for the Tanana River at Nenana. That's going to be until around midnight tonight. The promising news with that is that the water level is coming down, and so we expect the flood waters to recede and fall below flood stage at Nenana, expecting people to be able to begin the recovery process after a number of days of flooding in that area. So again, flood warning in effect for the Tanana River at Nenana. That's going to be until about midnight tonight, but the forecasters in Fairbanks will be keeping an eye on it, and they'll drop it if warranted sooner than that. For fire danger, just a small area of the state, the Yukon Flats, we've got high fire danger, and an even smaller area of extreme fire danger just on the north side of the Yukon River across the Yukon Flats. This is definitely something that we're going to be keeping an eye on over the next few days and into the weekend, though, as we're expecting a drying trend across the interior that could increase fire danger. So stay tuned over the coming days for more information about potential fire danger, especially if you have outdoor plans this weekend for the holiday. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we have a number of things going on. Most obvious being our low pressure system over the western Aleutians. We can see that spinning and bringing a nice front into the Aleutians. It's likely an occluded front with some moisture, some rain, and showers associated with it. We also have a weak low pressure system over eastern Russia, and that's bringing in that moisture across the Bering Sea and into the west coast of the state. And then over the northern Gulf and south central area, we actually have high pressure in command, so pretty dry conditions there, as well as the dry conditions over the Panhandle. That's why we're not expecting a lot of rain in the Juneau area today. So if we take a look at things overall, we see that big low pressure system for the western Aleutians, bringing that occluded front and a little bit of a cold front south of the Aleutians. So plenty of rain and rain showers for the Aleutians, stretching all the way up to eastern Russia through the Bering Sea. Also possibly some rain showers for the coastal YK Delta today with that moisture coming into the area. We'll see some isolated thunderstorms over the central and eastern portions of the interior today, but not a lot of thunder activity like we've seen in some recent days. Again, dry conditions over most of South Central and the Alaska Peninsula today, with high pressure in command over the Gulf. For tonight, we've got high pressure over the interior and still that low pressure moving into the Aleutians and bringing rain and showers. Some showers developing over the Seward Peninsula tonight, and maybe some showers starting to develop around a weak low pressure system over the northern Panhandle and western Canada area. We could see some thunderstorms into this evening and the overnight hours over the northeastern part of the state, and we expect some fog to develop along the north slope tonight. For Wednesday, still high pressure over the interior, so not a whole lot of thunderstorm activity, but could see some near the Canadian border in the eastern Brooks Range. The big thing is we'll see our low pressure system that was in the Aleutians expanding through the Bering Sea and bringing a good amount of moisture to the west coast, as well as some breezy winds for tomorrow. So expect increasing rain for the Seward Peninsula as well as the YK Delta areas tomorrow. High pressure still in command for the Gulf. So we'll see dry conditions mainly from the Alaska Peninsula north into South Central, and then also dry over the Panhandle again on Wednesday. For Thursday, we've got that front making landfall, if you will, across the west coast for continued rain across the west coast, pushing a little bit further up the Yukon River and a little bit further inland. Still generally high pressure in command over the mainland, though. Some fog behind that front over the Bering Sea for the Aleutians and up near St. Lawrence Island. High pressure still over the northern Gulf as well, so we'll see dry weather across the entire Gulf Coast, but that low pressure that was over Western Canada shifting a little bit further south on Thursday to down near the Panhandle, so we could see some rain showers for especially the higher terrain of the Panhandle on Thursday. Not much in the way of thunder on Thursday over Western Canada to some extent, so could stretch just into the higher terrain of the Panhandle, but pretty low chances for thunder on Thursday overall. For temperatures on Wednesday, Wednesday morning that is, we are looking at upper 40s to around 50 degrees for the Panhandle, and upper 40s to low 50s for South Central, as well as for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 40s, even some low 40s for the Aleutian Islands, and mid 40s for the West Coast. Some cooler temperatures along the North Slope, mid to upper 30s, and 40 to about 45 degrees across the Yukon Flats for Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, we'll see temperatures warm into the upper 50s to low 60s, pretty moderate for this time of year. Also upper 50s to low 60s for the Panhandle, South Central, our warmest spot as usual in the Yukon Flats area to about 65 degrees. Cooler along the west coast with that storm coming in, so highs just in the 40s to around 50 degrees for Seward Peninsula, and then 50 to about the mid 50s for the YK Delta area on Wednesday afternoon. For Thursday morning, a very similar scenario for much of the state, a little bit cooler across the Brooks Range, 38 to about 40 degrees, still mid 30s to upper 30s for the North Slope, and mid 40s to around 50 for much of the West Coast as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Still looking at low to mid 40s for the Aleutian Islands on Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, we'll see some additional warming compared to Wednesday, and this trend is actually going to continue as we look into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the coming days. The biggest question is going to be exactly how warm it's going to get. So for Thursday afternoon, we are looking at temperatures in the 60s to around 70 degrees for the Panhandle, so starting to see that warming trend there. Also, south central getting up into the mid to upper 60s to around 70 or even the lower 70s for parts of south central. Upper 50s to low 60s for the Alaska Peninsula, and upper 40s for the Aleutians, around 50 for much of the west coast, and mid 40s to around 50 for the North Slope. Our warmest area, as expected, still that Yukon Flats area where we could reach 70 degrees.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation weather. For Wednesday morning, we'll see IFR conditions across much of the YK Delta coast and the western portions of the Seward Peninsula, stretching south and west across St. Lawrence Island into the Bering and across much of the Aleutians. Also some IFR conditions in the northern Gulf, but the main story is going to be VFR over much of the mainland as well as the Panhandle on Wednesday morning. Not a whole lot of change looking into Wednesday afternoon. Still some MVFR right along the coast of the North Slope, with IFR just offshore the North Slope. IFR hanging on for the west coast for the YK Delta as well as the western portions of the Seward Peninsula, stretching south and west across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Still some IFR in the northern Gulf, but still VFR over the mainland as well as the Panhandle for Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, IFR along that immediate coast of the North Slope with some MVFR there as well. Still IFR from the west coast down through the Bering Sea and into the Aleutians. Still VFR though across the mainland as well as the Panhandle, with some MVFR conditions right over the Wrangell-St. Elias area as well as the higher terrain of the southernmost Panhandle for Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, that MVFR along the west coast is actually going to make it a little bit further inland into the Brooks Range as well as up the Yukon River just a little bit more and across the YK Delta. Still IFR conditions for much of the immediate west coast though, and pretty much all of the Aleutians, with VFR for much of the rest of the interior. Pretty good flying weather expected at the passes for Wednesday. Anaktuvuk Pass VFR as well as Adigan Pass VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both expected to be VFR on Wednesday, as well as Rainy Pass and Windy Pass expected to be VFR on Wednesday. Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass VFR on Wednesday, as well as Tinea Pass and Portage Pass VFR on Wednesday. And even Chilkoot and White passes looking like VFR conditions on Wednesday. Taking a look at freezing levels, as expected, we have those coldest freezing levels over the North Slope area with about 2,000 feet, increasing to about 4,000 feet across the central portions of the mainland across the Yukon Flats, 6,000 feet as we get down into South Central and across the Seward Peninsula, 8,000 feet stretching all the way from the Panhandle to the Alaska Peninsula and up to St. Lawrence Island, and that warmest air coming in across the Aleutians with about 10,000 feet freezing levels. For icing on Wednesday, a couple of areas both above 7,000 feet. First area is going to be from about the Brooks Range north to the North Slope, stretching east to the Canadian border and then south along the Canadian border. That second area is going to be stretching from the Bering Strait across the Seward Peninsula and through the interior to the northern side of the Alaska Range. Again, that's going to be isolated moderate on Wednesday above 7,000 feet. For the jet stream on Wednesday, our main player is going to be a low pressure over the North Slope as well as low pressure over the Panhandle, with a jet between those low pressure systems peaking out at about 90 knots over the Yukon Flats and 90 knots again just offshore the Panhandle. We also have another low pressure system that's been there for quite a while over eastern Russia. That has a jet out of the south to that low pressure east over eastern Russia, peaking about 95 knots. Looking at 9,000 foot winds, low pressure over the North Slope as well as low pressure system in the Bering Sea. Our highest winds are going to be east of that low pressure system in the Bering Sea, so winds out of the south over the Aleutians, 45 to 55 knots. Not a whole lot of wind to speak of over the mainland, just 5 to 15 to a couple of spots of 20 knots. Mostly about 5-knot winds over the Panhandle, but a bit of a jet streak just offshore the Panhandle, peaking about 25 to 30 knots out of the northwest. At 3,000 feet, high pressure mainly in command over the mainland, so our low pressure is in that same spot over the Bering Sea north of the Aleutians. That's going to bring our strongest winds out of the south and southwest over the Aleutians, 35 to 45 knots, mainly 5 to 10 knots over the mainland and about 10 to 15 knots for the panhandle at 3,000 feet on Wednesday. Turbulence on Wednesday, a couple of spots over the Aleutians where we have our most active weather. We expect some considerable moderate turbulence below 3,000 feet and below 4,000 feet across St. Lawrence Island and the westernmost tip of the Seward Peninsula.
So my heart is definitely racing. I don't know about anyone else's. This is the stuff nerds dream of.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6,
It's gonna
5,
happen.
4, 3, 2.
That countdown you just heard? We'll get back to that in a minute. Last episode, we saw the epic launch of ICESat-2, NASA's newest state-of-the-art ice-observing satellite. But now that that's in orbit, the pressure to deliver results is on.
Between launch and, the first ground returns, took 17, 18 days or something like this. It's a time when you're quite nervous.
9 years ago, Dr. Torsten Marcus took over as the lead project scientist for ICESat-2 during a time when the mission needed a champion.
You start fighting for a mission over, for 9 years now.
So when ICESat-2 was turned on for the first time 18 days after it was launched, only then would the science team know if the whole thing had worked. And it did.
First of all, it's kind of emotional, right? Being here, ICESat-2 was developing for 9-10 years. Project scientist, you live the mission, right?
If it sounds like there's a lot of noise in the background, that's because Torsten is being interviewed from a plane 1,500 feet in the air. IceBridge was tasked with the job of bridging the data between the end of ICESat's mission and the beginning of ICESat-2, about a 9-year difference.
The goal is that it would run until ICESat-2 launched and then would have overlap with ICESat-2 as well, so we can get a really long, well-calibrated time series from IceBridge.
As the deputy project scientist for Operation IceBridge, Brick works closely with Torsten to make sure the two missions are syncing up.
The timing was everything during that mission, which was a real challenge because not only do we need to...
Basically what you need to take away is getting an airplane and a satellite in space to fly over the same flight path at the same time and collect matching data is really, really hard. IceBridge was tasked with two objectives. Check the accuracy of ICESat-2's data over land ice and over sea ice. They were able to lock in the land ice data fairly quickly in the mission, but the sea ice data...
It was really tricky. We waited day after day. Do we fly the sea ice? It's still on our list.
7, 6,
It's gonna
5,
happen.
4, 3, 2, 1. Mark on the overpass 0435, 35 Zulu.
Here's what just happened. A plane 1,500 feet up and a satellite 308 miles up measured the same sea ice at the same time. This moment finally linked veteran mission Operation IceBridge's data to that of its new sister mission, ICESat-2. Two projects that, until now, were separate for nearly 10 years.
It's a very satisfying feeling because you do something that is meaningful and in the bigger picture. And yeah, it's very satisfying.
Our search for knowledge doesn't end here. Grace Follow-On and ICESat-2, the two satellite missions that launched this year, will continue to bring in incredible data for the foreseeable future. The steady drumbeat of campaigns in the field goes on, but most of all, the people who look for answers will never stop searching. And from our perspective, it's pretty clear why. What is your favorite planet in the solar system?
My favorite planet is the planet Earth.
What? Earth? Really?
The Earth, obviously.
Favorite planet in the solar system? Earth, right? We live on it. It's a really important one.
Favorite planet is Earth.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you look out at the other planets, they're absolutely fascinating. They've got all sorts of interesting systems going on. They've got dust storms. But then when you're on another planet, looking back at Earth, I mean, it's just incredible.
Whenever you go in different places, it looks so different, so amazing. It's just, I love planet Earth. It's just a very special planet. This is our home.
We've seen things far beyond the solar system. But even with all that, even the amazing things we've seen, one of the most amazing is the Earth itself.
It's got to be Earth. It's got to be Earth.
It's got to be here. I like the polar regions up here, of Earth. Yeah, sorry. It's very boring.
Earth is good.
Earth is good.
We live here, it sustains our life.
I'm not going to turn my back on it.
It's got water, it's got ice, it's got vegetation. I mean, it's rich with life. And so studying Earth is a very, very rewarding career. And I think if we were on any other planet, we would be trying to get to Earth as quickly as we could.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast. We'll start out with the sea ice edge, where we're not seeing a lot of change in the last 24 hours, but maybe those small patches of ice that were still hanging on the north side of Seward Peninsula. Looks like maybe they've melted away. We expect those trends to continue for the next few days looking forward. For southeast waters, we'll see high pressure in the northern Gulf, so we expect the southeast portion of the state to be on the east side of that high pressure, bringing in north and northwest winds 15 to 20 knots over the Gulf and about 10 to 15 knots over the inside waterways. Seas in the 6 to 8 foot range for the Gulf and about 2 to 3 feet for the inside waterways. Winds picking up a little bit on Thursday to about 25 knots out of the north and northwest along the Panhandle coast, and 15 to 20 knots out of the north for the inside waterways. Seas also coming up with those winds a little bit, so 5 to about 10 knots for the Gulf side on Thursday. For South Central on Wednesday, this is going to be on the north side of that high pressure system, so we'll see generally westerly winds with a little bit of northwest, 10 to 15 knots, 20 knots near the Barrens being the strongest winds that we'll see on Wednesday. Seas relatively mild, 4 to 6 feet for the Gulf, about 2 feet in Cook Inlet as well as Prince William Sound. For Thursday, a little bit of a wind shift, particularly for Cook Inlet with some more southwesterly winds, but for the Gulf, we'll still see westerly and northwesterly winds on the north side of that low pressure system. Picking up just a little bit, generally 15 to about 25 knots for the Gulf on Thursday. Wednesday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, we're going to be on the west side of that high pressure system. So winds are going to be out of the south and west, 15 to 20 knots, about 25 knots on the north side of Cold Bay and Sand Point. Seas 4 feet for the Gulf and up to about 5 feet for the Bering side of the peninsula. Looking ahead into Thursday, winds a little more consistent out of the south and west, 15 to 20 knots across the board. Seas still 4 to 6 feet for the Gulf and about 4 to 6 feet for the Bering side as well. For the Aleutians, we've got low pressure that's going to be moving in, so we can see that big area of higher seas north of the Aleutians. Winds are going to be kicked up with that low pressure system as well. So we'll see winds generally out of the south and southwest, 20 to about 30 knots on Wednesday. Seas 7 to 13 feet, peaking around 14 feet for the western Aleutians on Wednesday. Winds and seas coming down noticeably on Thursday for the Aleutians, as that low pressure system will have passed by. So winds out of the south generally 10 to about 20 knots, around 25 knots for the far western Aleutians. Seas coming down quite a bit as well, just 5 to about 8 feet for Thursday in the Aleutians. For the west coast on Wednesday, this is where we'll see that low pressure system moving over the Bering Sea. Strongest winds south of St. Matthew Island, about 35 knots out of the south. So expecting some gales there on Wednesday. 25 to 30 knots out of the south and southeast, moving a little bit further north, and a little bit of shadowing for the Norton Sound area south at about 15 knots. Seas peaking in that area of the Bering south of St. Matthew Island about 14 feet and decreasing as we head toward the west coast, about 4 feet in Norton Sound and 7 feet off the Kuskokwim Delta. Into Thursday, again, now this area on Thursday will be behind the low pressure system, so we'll see a decrease in seas for sure, and generally a decrease in winds. The exception to that will be the Norton Sound area. They'll have one last small increase in winds to about 20 knots out of the south. Elsewhere, 15 to 25 knots out of the south, seas ranging from about 6 to 11 feet on Thursday. For the Arctic coast, 5 to 10 knots out of the west for the North Slope areas, 10 to 25 knots out of the southeast and east for the west coast, with Chukchi Sea area around 10 knots out of the west. For Thursday, wind shift along the North Slope out of the east to 10 to 15 knots and about 20 knots for the west coast. Reminder, we have that flood warning in effect still this evening for the Tanana River near Nanana for tonight until about midnight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.